And the last one was in Glasgow in COP28. It was called COP26. Colombian actually went there, and we're gonna tell you in a second our experience. And COP27 is gonna happen in a week. It's gonna be in Egypt, Sharm el Sheikh, and there's gonna be a big role, for example, in the United Kingdom because the Prime Minister was supposed not to go, and then because also the protest that happened, he's actually going. So countries are, even if there are many now other crises right now, countries are still acknowledging that it's an important moment.
And the role of COP, by the way, is to negotiate. So it's for countries to actually negotiate the way of getting out of the climate crisis. So it came out of a treaty and so on. And the idea is we're still stuck on the same articles for the last couple of years to negotiate how we will mitigate climate change. So the COP in itself is extremely important. It's the moment where we're supposed to put into place climate action. We're supposed to make pledges. So countries say we will diminish by X%, we'll do this. 99.9% of them don't, actually. And then where they negotiate points that are on the table, such as actually supporting financially countries that are not responsible and are developing for climate mitigation or climate projects, such as understanding how to cut down on emissions and so on. So the conference is itself super important. It also involves, to a lesser extent, activists and NGOs.
Yeah.
And right now, it's one of the best hopes we have. So before we explain what's wrong with it, it is true that it's one of the few hopes we have for humanity's future. So it deeply matters. I'm happy it's happening in Egypt, a country with extremely poor human rights record, but it's extremely important that this happens and that pledges are made, that countries, and it is useful in the sense that the press puts a huge focus on climate and on countries' failures and achievements. So it's kind of a mirror bounce back at countries, which is important. And hopefully this year at COP, we would see many breakthroughs, including on the percentage of reduction. I would love to see the banning of fossil fuel subsidies. It's something fossil fuels are responsible for 82% of global emissions, if I'm not mistaken. And subsidies help in doing this immensely. To give you a concrete idea, in France, we give more subsidies to fossil fuel than to green energy, which is insane.
No, in many countries it's the case. But so this conference is happening. COP26 last year was successful in the way they attract attention on the topic and countries pledges. But I went this morning to review. There's a very interesting article from Reuters saying, basically describing the outcome of COP26 1 year later, 1 year in, and sadly most of the pledges that were made are not being respected. I think that one of the most striking results is that if you look at the national emissions plans, the 200 countries have pledged. I think only 24 countries, so 24 countries, have actually complied with their own plans. So you see how...
And those are self-imposed, right? It's not even like a committee being like, you need to reduce by 45% your emissions. It's a country being like, oh, next year we'll reduce by 2%. Exactly. It's not like they're putting harsh standards on themselves.
No, it's completely self-imposed. And in this sense, so basically the world is failing in a way, and still COP is good. I mean, COP is the only thing we have right now that is going on and pushing countries to do better on this topic. So COP27 is happening next week. We are not going to go this time, Colombe and I. We are there at COP26.
Yeah, we're not going to go because Egypt is not the best place to go for human rights activists, but also because it's too expensive. COP26, what we've seen is, let's talk 2 seconds about the figures after talking about the hope. The issue with COP26 is it was completely unaffordable, and we're lucky to live in the UK, so not far away from Glasgow where it took place. And we were only able to stay 12 hours because a hotel for the night was like hundreds of pounds, and so insanely expensive.
Yeah.
A lot of it was more of a food fair than the climate conference, as in activists didn't have access to a lot of the rooms, so you had a lot of then booths that activists did that were amazing, or that countries that were trying to greenwash did, or that companies were doing, and so on. But it was very difficult to actually get into the negotiation rooms that are the only thing that actually matters at those events.
Yeah.
And I think fossil fuel companies and lobbies had like again a huge place. But that was I think the UK also mismanaging it.
I remember like with such a weird experience.
Yeah.
Like, you obviously you cannot, before you go there, you cannot really imagine how things go. You might think they just a conference with a lot of people speaking on panels, but actually when we went there the first time, it's really a fair. It's really like there are a lot of booths of people discussing many different things, many companies presenting their solutions and so on. So it's also kind of like this vibe of like sale fair, and then basically as a member of the public or as a
At 7 a.m.
in
today.
this case of a representative of an NGO, you actually don't have access to a lot of these things. Like we were there and we could not join. I'm not saying negotiating, but assisting to a negotiation or participating in certain events is completely stonewalled. And so it's a very, very weird experience. And then you have, for example, I remember a lot of like food stores where they sell a lot of meat.
Yeah.
Which again, like I'm vegetarian, so I have a different views of that. I understand that you might still want to have some meat, but it was very. This was a big focus on the Scottish meat.
That's so weird.
So weird. Like if you go to a conference about lung cancer, you sell cigarettes. It's very weird. Like you're not supposed to do so. So for us, it was a very odd experience that we do not recommend to anyone. So I mean, if you can go to COP27.
But yeah, I was going to say, but I think it's fundamental that activists go, NGOs go. We have more of a focus on global governance, and we'll talk about how we think global governance can help in solving the climate crisis, and it's just unaffordable for us. But I think it's fundamental to have activists, NGOs, journalists, companies holding governments accountable for the lack of climate action, showing the way forward. And I think they need to be afforded much more space. And I think that's kind of the failures of COP26, but it's due to how the UN is structured. Is citizens don't have a direct say, and only countries do. So it's national interest first. When you are a conference of parties over hundreds of countries with different national interests, different electoral timetables that obviously play into what you're going to do, right? If you go to elections next year, right now, you're not going to be super happy to increase the cost of living by actually cracking down on fossil fuels in a lot of countries. So if you have all of those different interests with the idea of answering to your electorate first, there's very little chance that a conference like this can lead to success. I still think it's our best hope right now for immediate action, so we need to. So this is when you all need to be watching out for this. You need to be contacting your government, your elected representatives, supporting NGOs going and so on. It is fundamental, but we need to think of longer term solutions to be able to solve and put an end to the climate crisis, because it's not going to happen in the next 5 years. And the environment and climate is going to be a topic forever. So we need to think about it in a more systematic manner.
And this is where we come in.
Did I do the perfect transition?
You did the perfect transition.
Didn't you want to mention that did you mention that the Rishi Sunak is going now also?
I mentioned before, but yeah, basically the UK, the British Prime Minister that took office like 10 days ago, was at the beginning said like I'm not going to COP, I'm too busy with the budget and so on. Then there was a massive backlash, and obviously the Just Stop Oil actions, and now he's actually going. So you see that actually activism help, and even very powerful world leaders cannot ignore the climate crisis. So good that he's going, good that...
What a bad first move to be like, nope, I won't be going to this, I don't care.
It's so weird. Like,
so bad.
Bad PR as well. So how do we solve the climate crisis? We know
beyond the immediate need of COP.
Beyond what COP is doing and what many other people are doing that is very intelligent and clever, and what activists are doing, incredible tech solutions have been created, but we think that we have something more to propose. Chrome, do you want to go for it, or should I go for it?
Sorry, I'm just sending the links.
So I'll go for it in the meantime.